the official podcast of the Jacksonville Public Library.
I'm Hurley.
And I'm Jenna.
Today we have an author who is featured in our local author collection here at the library. Her name is Nikesha Elise Williams. Her first novel, For Women, came out a few years ago, and she just released her second novel, The Appeal of Ebony Jones, last year. And we had a great time talking to her today. What did we talk about, Jenna?
Well, we talked about her, first of all, her hard drive crashing right before she finished her very first novel.
Can you imagine?
No, I feel like if it would have been her second novel and she had done it before and had the satisfaction of finishing a book, that it would have been a little more believable that she restarted.
Right.
But being her first novel, had never completed one before, I just feel like that would be such a letdown, pouring your heart into this, personal project. She self-published this book. So it was just kind of a passion project for her, and losing it right before you finish is just devastating. I can't imagine.
But that's what separates the gritty from the non-gritty.
That's
and
true.
Nevertheless, she persisted. She rewrote her manuscript, and her first novel came out, and she wrote another book.
Yeah, by popular demand, everyone asked for, I guess the first one kind of ended in a cliffhanger, and everyone just kept asking, what happens? And so that's when she decided to write the sequel.
Right. And she finished the draft of the sequel, which is called The Appeal of Ebony Jones, in just 2 months, which, wow. After that hard drive crash, she really bounced back. And she says during our interview, she thought of it more as a setup for a comeback instead of a setback.
Right.
And I love the way she said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I ended up asking her afterwards, how long will she sit there and write? And she said usually like 3 to 4 hours. She'll sit down on her computer, write, maybe take a couple breaks, but yeah, she was getting after it. That's really, really fast to write an entire novel.
Yeah, Nikesha has some perseverance. It's incredible to see. Nikesha's part of one of our groups here at the library called the JPL Authors Roundtable, and that group meets the third Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. at the Highlands Regional Library. And this is a group devoted to letting authors know about different resources available for authors, sort of a networking group. They also talk a lot about editing and self-publishing, and that's where Nikesha, our author today, ended up meeting her editors. So make sure if you are an author interested in self-publishing that you go check out the JPL Authors Roundtable. Again, that's the third Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. at the Highlands Regional Library.
So let's hear a little bit about Nikesha and her journey as a new author. Brian, hit that track.
Hit it. Nikesha Williams, thank you so much for joining us on Completely Booked today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you're a Jacksonville author writing mostly in Jacksonville and about Jacksonville.
Yes.
Are you from the area originally?
No, I am from Chicago.
Interesting. What brought you here?
A man. No.
Okay.
My husband and I met in Texas, and that's where we met. And he was born in Daytona, but he moved to Jacksonville, and so I followed.
Wonderful. And how long have you been here?
I've been in Jacksonville, 7 years.
Okay.
Going on 8, yeah.
So long enough. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And how long have you been writing?
Forever, it seems like. But my first novel came out in 2017, but the very first inklings of it started in 2010.
Okay. And it started as a short story, right?
Yeah, the very first chapter, and I think chapter 5 in For Women started off as a short story that I wrote just on a whim. And I never did anything with it for a few years. And then when I finally decided, okay, maybe we should pick this back up, it was like 2013. And that's when the journey to being published began.
Right. So what about the short story made you realize, oh, this should really be a longer form piece? It should really be a novel instead of a short story.
I don't know if I really realized that at first. When I first started the short story, I did it out of boredom. And I know reading that first chapter in For Women, it's like, you wrote this because you were bored? And I was like, yeah, I did. And I just kind of saved it and never did anything with it. I sent it to my best friend, and she was like, I don't know where your head is going, but I like it. And I mean, it just kind of stayed dormant in my computer. And then I had another thought for a character that I never really did anything with, but that character never left me. And so then in 2013, I was between jobs, and I saw this contest called Critique My Novel, where you send in like the first 10,000 words of a novel and you get professional feedback on it. And I was like, I can write 10,000 words between March and May when the contest opens. And so I did. So I took the short story and that second character that I thought of, and I added 2 more, and it became 4 women. And that's really was like, I was just writing just to see where the story went. I was so, I guess, unprofessional. I didn't have an outline. I didn't have an end goal. I was just letting the story unfold as it happened.
Sort of writing by the seat of your pants.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So as you mentioned, there are 4 women in your first novel, 4
Yes.
women, and they all grapple in this post-Ray Rice, Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis, Michael Brown world. What was it about all of these tragic, fatal shootings that inspired you to write from the perspectives of 4 different women?
So I am a news producer by trade. And so when I was first writing, it was 2013. That was the year that George Zimmerman went on trial for Trayvon Martin. And then Jordan Davis's trial happened in 2014 for Michael Dunn. And just, I kept seeing, like, we're always talking about the boys and the men, the boys and the men, the boys and the men. But I'm like, where are the women in these stories? There have got to be Black women or just women in general dealing with, like, these same issues of, like, police brutality or, you know, just overzealous neighbors, like thinking of, like, Rakia Boyd and Renisha McBride specifically. And I was like, you know, I didn't know their names at first. And I was like, well, I don't know their names. Most other people don't know their names either. So why don't I write this story, this fictional story that I've already started on, and like weave those issues in there. And then it was also the time when that video of Ray Rice punching his then fiance came out, which was really hard to watch. And it was like, you know, people were talking about, you know, well, why didn't she leave if she was going through that? And then it became this whole hashtag, why I stayed, and all these other things. And I was just like, you know, I want to talk about that too. I want to talk about all of these issues. But, you know, when you get on a soapbox and you talk about real life stuff, people kind of tend to ignore you. But if it's fiction, it makes it more palatable, and it makes it easier for people to digest and still get your point and get your message across without it being like a real situation.
Interesting. What do you think would have happened if you had written this as nonfiction? Do you think it would have been as well received?
I don't know that I could have done it. I blogged for a few years from like 2010 to 2012, so only a couple. And what I found was that working in news and doing the news every day and being plugged in, and then going home and writing more news, but from my opinion or my, you know, sassy pop culture take, was draining. And, you know, that writing a blog is very demanding because as you build a readership, you have to keep up your followers and keep up your numbers, which means you have to constantly post. And I'm a one-woman show. So it was like, I can't, it's too much. And so I stopped doing the blog. And as I stopped doing the blog, I still loved writing. And so it really kind of just became all that being poured into the book. And there was no deadline because nobody knew it was coming out.
Right. So your latest novel, The Appeal of Ebony Jones, follows a character you wrote about in your first novel, For Women. Mm-hmm. What made you want to return to Ebony Jones' character and bring her back to the page?
It's not so much that I wanted to return to Ebony's character. It's that people and friends and family members that have read the novel, they were like, we need to know what happens at the end of the story. Like, you just kind of leave us on a cliffhanger. Like, you don't answer the questions because it all ends with like an unknown. Spoiler alert, it ends with a verdict that you don't get at the end of For Women. Ooh. So, you know, it was like, well, what's the verdict? What happened? And I was like, you know, well, I don't want to convict this character that I love, but just acquitting her seems like unreal. Like, that just would never happen in real life. So after a few years, because I finished For Women in 2015, and after a few years and it finally coming out and enough people saying, you know, you kind of need to write a sequel, and then my writer friend saying, you know, if your readers ask you for a sequel, you write one. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I figured out a way to kind of do both and kind of just to dive deeper into who she is as a woman and what motivates her, what drives her. And I like the word appeal. A lot of people say, oh, it's called The Appeal of Ebony Jones, so we know what happens, we know what the verdict is. But I'm like, appeal has more than one definition. It's right. About, you know, how do they look, how are they attractive, and, you know, what attracts people to her as a woman and as a person. And so I like that play on words. And, you know, so it was just kind of the demand of finishing the story instead of just making my point on culture and news at at that moment in time.
And what a huge compliment to have your readers ask you for more. How did that feel?
It felt really good. I also felt really pressured. I wrote For Women, as I said. I started in 2013. I finished in 2015 due to a couple of starts and stops. But The Appeal of Ebony Jones, I started that January 7th of this year, and it came out August 3rd. I finished the first draft in 2 months, on March 12th.
That is unbelievable.
So it was a lot of pressure to write the book. But then when I finished it, I was like, I don't know if it's good. I don't know if this is what people want. I don't know if it's what they're looking for or what they had in mind. But here it is. It's like I did my part. So it's been good, and I've been excited about the reception of both novels, and that, Madeline Peck Wagner from Folio Weekly texted me after she reviewed it, and she was like, I really like how the character sat with me once the story was over. And I was like, okay, well, then I think I've succeeded in crafting a story that readers will enjoy and they'll get my point.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you more, though, about this feat that you managed to accomplish. You wrote a draft of a novel in 2 months. That is unbelievably quick. How did you do that? What was your writing process like during those 2 months?
Oh, gosh. So before I started, I reread For Women cover to cover, so that I would know what questions that I needed to answer, and what character traits I needed to continue, and just getting back into the headspace of these four women, knowing that I was going to focus mostly on Ebony and who she was and her relationships. And so after I did that, I take notes in my phone. And so I had all these notes in my phone, and then I started to outline the novel in chapters. I don't do really deep character outlines. I do, chapter by chapter, like this is what happens in chapter 1. And I knew where I was going to go and how it was going to end. And so once I did that, I printed out those notes, and I just started from, page 1, chapter 1, and I wrote along the way. And then as things started to develop in the novel, or as new characters started to appear, or as I find maybe a slicker way to do something, I would go down that route. Excuse me. And so the only thing that really deviated from my notes was how the book ends. I was going to end it one way, and I thought that's kind of contrived. And so I ended it a way that felt more real life to the characters, and even to the theme of what I was talking about. And from there, it was my goal to write the book in 4 months, so from January to April. But my friends, who once I revealed the title online on Facebook, they kept pushing me like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Every day I go into work, are you done yet? Or they text me, are you done yet? Or somebody would finish the book and then reach out to me via social media or via a friend, like, you need to tell your friend that she needs to finish the book, because I want to know if this happens and if this happens and if this happens. And I'm like, I'm writing, and I'm working a full-time job, and I'm a full-time wife and a full-time mother, so I'm going as fast as I can.
Other stuff going on.
Right. I'm like, I have 4 jobs.
Yeah. It may feel like pressure, but some would call that accountability, I guess, which is a form of pressure.
I was very accountable, and I finished, and it's out.
Yeah. So how did you leave this second novel? Is there another cliffhanger? Do you think there's another one coming?
No.
Or is it pretty definitive?
I think it's wrapped up. I think it ends on a definitive ending. Their lives will just go on. We don't necessarily need to revisit them. There might be one character that could have a spinoff. I'm not there yet in her life to do that, so I'll just leave it at that. So I think the story with the 4 women is done.
I want to know what you mean when you say that, though. You're not there yet with her in her life. Do you feel like your characters really have lives of their own off the page?
They absolutely do. I mean, I'm writing about real things and real topics, but I'm also just writing about life. So when I first started For Women, I was 26, 27, something like that. And now I'm 32. A couple of my characters are older than I am. So I need to get a little older and go through maybe some more things in life, just to be able to really speak from their point of view of what their lives would look like now. And so even though my novels are fiction, I do bring a lot of real life elements into it, even with the setting being in the city of Jacksonville. I want people here that live in the city, if they pick up my book and they read it, they can go to these places that I'm talking about. They can go to the Duval County Courthouse. They can go to the Sykes and Stowe Auto Body Shop. They can go to the restaurants or to town center or to the apartment building or to the neighborhoods. They can go to these places and see and touch and feel the areas that I'm talking about. Or even in the Appeal of Ebony Jones, one of the characters, his mother lives on the north side. You can go into that neighborhood and you can go down that block and you can see the house and you can see the neighborhoods that I'm talking about and really feel the vibe of the city and feel the vibe of the characters and kind of get to know them. And so with the character that I'm speaking of that could have a spinoff would be Dawn Anthony. You know, I would just need to be a little bit older and a little bit more mature before I wrote anything else about her.
Right. That makes sense. So I read in your interview with the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville that when you started working on For Women, you suffered a hard drive crash and lost your manuscript. That must have been terrible. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, gosh, I cried so much. So, like I said, I started For Women in 2013 in March. In March of 2014, I was sitting, it was a Sunday, I was sitting in my dining room at the table. I was typing on the laptop. I was 7 chapters from the end, so I think I was at like chapter 32, because in the original manuscript, I think it was only 39 chapters. And I wrote a couple pages. I went to save. It didn't save. Shut down the computer, turn it back on. Those 2 pages are gone, but okay, that's fine. I only lost 2 pages. Started to do it again. I write those 2 pages, go to save. It won't save. Spinning wheel of death. Hard shut down. Open up the file again. There's no file. Not only is there no file, there is nothing on the flash drive. Not a thing. There was nothing there. I was like, oh my God, I cried. Then I like leapt up, ran out of the house, went to Best Buy. I was like, I just need you to fix this. In the line for Geek Squad, I was distraught. I'm like, I don't care how much it costs. I don't care what it takes. I just need you to find my file. And then there was this man in the line who I didn't know from Adam. He was like, you don't ever tell anybody that you don't care how much something costs. And I was like, sir, I really don't care. He was like, well, I do data recovery. Come with me, I'll help you. And I followed him to this little data recovery computer shop off Beach Boulevard between like 2 used car lots. Didn't know this man from Adam. And he pulled every file off that flash drive except my manuscript. But he set me up with a Dropbox account. He sent off the flash drive to some other data recovery specialists in Seattle. They also pulled every paper, every file, every blog post, every college paper, every resume, whatever it was on there off of that flash drive except my manuscript. And so when they finally said, okay, we can't find it in May of 2014, I was like, okay, I guess I have to start over. And all I had was like those first 10,000 words from the contest that I had sent in, because I had sent it in an email to a couple of friends. When I finished those 10,000 words, like, what do you think? I was able to find that email and download that draft. And so I had to start over from like word 10,001.
Wow.
So many people would have just given up. I
Right.
feel like that would have been devastating.
What pushed you forward?
Oh my gosh.
My husband was like, I don't know what to tell you, Nikesha. Like, I'm not the biggest encourager. You're either going to start over and you're going to finish it, or you're going to quit. And then my mom was like, you're never going to be able to remember everything you wrote. I'm like, no, I won't be able to remember it, but I know the story, so I can rewrite it. Like, it may not be exactly what I had before, but I can rewrite it. And then, you know, the cliches of things came to my head where it was like, you know, this isn't a setback, it's just a setup for a comeback. And that's kind of how I motivated myself into doing it. And once I started over, a lot of it was out of frustration and anger, because I was just trying to get back to what I lost, because I'd never finished. So I was trying to get back to what I lost. And then once I did, I finished.
Wow.
In March of 2015.
Do you think in some crazy morbid way that this made the novel better, rewriting it?
I do. I mean, between the time that I lost it and the time that I finished it, I had a whole child. So May 2014 was when the data recovery specialist in Seattle said that they couldn't find it. That's also the month I found out I was pregnant with my first child. I found I was having a boy.
What a month.
And exactly. So pregnant, frustrated, mad, angry, crying, cursing, all of that. I started over, and when I finished it, my son was 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And as soon as I was writing those last couple of sentences, he woke up from his nap, and he was literally in my arms nursing, and I was typing over him, finishing For Women. And with every book I've written since, because there are a couple of manuscripts that aren't real books yet, he's been there, like awake or in my lap or next to me when I've finished.
Wow.
So it's been in a morbid way, it was supposed to happen like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes that happens. Yeah.
What resilience. That's crazy.
Yeah, amazing. So in addition to your work as a novelist, you mentioned that you're also a television producer for Action News Jax. I want to know how your work in television has helped you in your work as a creative writer.
It gives me my content. So I'm thankful for that, because I don't think there's anything crazier than the world that we live in. And, life can inspire art. And so it definitely helps me with the content, like, let's explore that topic a lot. Let's exploit that a lot and twist it and turn it and make it into something that will still get the point across, but it's fun and entertaining and a little bit removed from reality. It also has helped me in a sense that as a producer, I basically need to see what my show is going to look like on air before it ever hits the air. And so that visualization and just writing to the set and to how I want to move my anchors around and tell the stories of the news helps me in writing a novel, because now I'm trying to imagine myself inhabiting these spaces where my characters are. Are they in the library? Are they on the street? What does it look like? What does it smell like? Trying to really do that writer thing where, you show, don't tell. So I want you to see it like a movie, but you're reading it.
That's a good angle. I didn't think about that as a producer, having to kind of see it happen before it happens. And that's the same when you're writing your books. Mm-hmm. In addition to being a producer, you also participated in our Jax Book Fest last year. How was that experience for you?
It was fun. So I came to the inaugural one and just kind of walked around. And that's when I was getting ready to release For Women. So that was like February 2017. And I just walked around. I had like little samplers and a couple of galleys, and I just passed them out and did that whole thing, and it was really fun. Participating last year, I didn't really have an expectation. It was only my second book festival ever. I did the Fresh Book Festival down in Daytona in January, and then I was up here. And so I was just at my table, and I only had my one book, and a lot of people came over. I think I sold 14 books that day.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So I had a great time.
Yeah, terrific. And you mentioned that you have a few other manuscripts in the works right now.
Yes.
Are you working on something new? Can you tell us anything about it?
So the next book that will come out Valentine's Day of next year. I finished it in August. I've reread it and put in my edits, and I'm just waiting on my editor to get back with me so that I can get it off to him. And that will be out Valentine's Day of next year. There may be two books coming out next year. I just haven't decided yet, because if there are, then I need to start writing the third one for this year. And then there's another book that I wrote in the run-up to For Women. So, like I said, I finished For Women in 2015. In like October of 2016, I started another manuscript from a thesis that I wrote when I was in college, kind of just picked those characters back up and just like, where would their lives look like now? And wrote that and finished it in August of 2017, before For Women even came out. So that manuscript is just first draft done, sitting on the printer, ready to go. But I will have the first 4 chapters of that in the book that comes out in February, as just stay tuned. This is coming too.
Wonderful.
So there's some work in the works.
Nice.
Good. Love hearing that. And we ask this at the end of all of our interviews. We want to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think when I was little, like 3, 4, 5, I wanted to be a writer. When I got maybe like 10, 11, 12, I wanted to be a dancer because I trained in ballet and stuff. And so by the time I was 18, it has been my dream to write and choreograph a musical.
Ooh.
So,
do you think you'd ever write anything for that? Have you written anything for that?
I have not written a stage play. For Women has been transformed into a screenplay. It's very rough. I just kind of did it and like saved it. So it's in my computer ready to go, and I can imagine dances to it. So it's in the hands of God at this point.
Maybe.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
So. Yeah, lots ahead of you. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on our show, Nikesha.
I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty inspired by Nikesha's perseverance throughout that whole process, and especially not really planning to make it a whole novel and just turning into it and then losing it and starting over and then starting another one.
Right. And when she started another one, I loved how she said that before she even started writing, she reread For Women, her first novel, and she asked herself, like, what questions do I need to answer based on this existing book? And that it feels like she respects her characters so much as their own individuals. So I loved hearing more about her process. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, and the way she said that she needed to be a little older to kind of follow the story of one of the characters that's older than her already. It's like she's really putting in these like really intimate personal details and kind of making it more accurate by doing that.
So Nikesha just participated in our Jax Makes program a couple weeks ago here at the main library, and she gave a presentation on self-publishing. And I know that everybody who attended that program learned so much from Nikesha because she really knows her stuff on self-publishing.
Yeah, and I hope that we get her back again soon, and maybe we'll do another episode just about self-publishing. I know a lot of authors have a lot of questions about that, and maybe are scared to even start a novel because they know, how do I get this published? How do people read it? So I think that's really great information. I hope we can get her again.
Definitely. You can learn more about Nikesha's work at her website, newwrites.com. That's NEWWRITES.com. And she's also on Twitter and Instagram at Nikesha_Elise. Her books, For Women and The Appeal of Ebony Jones, are available in our catalog, so you can search those on our website, jaxpubliclibrary.org, or through our app. And Nikesha also let us know that she applied to be part of Jax Book Fest 2019, which takes place on February 23rd right here at the main library. And if you, listener, are an author who is interested in registering for the Jax Book Fest, please apply online through November 30th at jplfoundation.org/JaxBookFest.
Yes, make sure everyone comes out and saves that date, February 23rd, Jax Book Fest at the main library.
And who else is going to be there, Jenna?
Only R.L. Stein.
R.L. Stein, y'all. The Goosebumps author himself is going to be there.
It's going to be crazy.
Yes, going to be wild.
Don't miss out.
Don't miss it.
Make sure you guys follow us on social media at Jax Library. We'll be posting some pics from this interview and lots of other amazing information.
Yes, and subscribe, rate, and leave us a review for our show. Thanks to all of our lovely reviewers who have done so already.
Yes, keep them coming, everybody.
You can listen to more of our episodes at jaxpubliclibrary.org/podcast. This podcast was produced by Brian Thomas, a.k.a. BT, a.k.a. Producer Brian. Goodbye.